Hey everyone, welcome back to brand new Take Aim podcast. And with me this week, once again, is Blake Garrett from the Unfiltered Outdoor app. And every year, me and Blake kind of get together and go over a summer scouting special. And this year's no exception. We kind of run through just some unique techniques, or the program, I should say, that Blake uses year-round. Basically transitions from summer to fall, through winter, feeding, the whole 9 yards, but how to do something low impact. The deer just kind of feel safe all year round. And it's a great show. Tons of information from Blake, so hope you guys enjoy. Guys, we are back, brand new Take Aim podcast, and as always, I'm your host, Brandon Hammonds. Excited to get another show out, and every summer, me and this guy, Blake Garrett, hook up and kind of go over just what we do scouting-wise, some of the principles to just kind of getting, dialed in on your properties, and just some other ways to scout that maybe you're not thinking about. And I know last year we did a 3-part series. This year we're going to come up with a couple extra episodes that do the same thing, but excited to have Blake back on and kind of talk about this awesome time of growing season. So what's up, Blake?
How are you, man?
Good, man. Excited to have you on. I know I always get excited when I get some texts from Blake because usually that means I get to see some velvet, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, this is like my favorite time of the year, honestly. A lot of guys are like, oh, I love the rut, I love hunting them. I honestly get a lot of enjoyment out of this time of the year. It seems like it's almost like Christmas. You kind of get to see the deer that you had last year. You get to pick them up for another year, or maybe you pick up a new deer even on camera. It's just kind of a cool time that builds a lot of anticipation for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing I just love about it, but it kind of gives you that which is weird, but it develops that relationship we have with the deer and how much we enjoy just, the feeding process, mineral process, but seeing them in velvet, seeing a deer, like you said, from last year, Blake, kind of come this year and blow up or put some mass on or change or grow a kicker. It's like you said, it's probably one of my favorite times too. I love to be in the stand and hunting, but this time of year is really special.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Myself, a lot of guys, gosh, there's just a ton of guys out there that do a lot of research on deer, and I don't know as many, a lot of guys try to figure out, kind of what it would take to, get in front of a mature deer and things like that. And it's I kind of go into it as a learning process and as a book, and I try to learn more and more about these deer every year. And, we treat every deer like they're an individual, and that has really changed a lot over the years from, ways we used to kind of try to follow deer and try to get in front of deer, and it has made us a lot more successful with kind of trying to identify personalities about deer, kind of what they'll tolerate, what they won't in accordance to pressure, what they like as far as movement goes. There's, we've noticed some deer, some bucks especially, will like to travel a little bit farther on a daily basis for food, as other bucks will really try to suck in and try to travel the smallest amount they can when they find a food source that they like. And we just kind of, we really try to classify those deer and identify that early. And we'll even identify it, all the way back to, 3-year-olds. I'll say where we really start the process of trail camera management and trying to kind of identify these little traits about these individual deer that, hopefully we can find a kink in the armor to where we can really get in front of that deer, use that personality and kind of find, hey, he likes to stay close to food. So we can kind of, we kind of know that when it goes into year 4, year 5, whatever year it is, we're trying to kill him, try to utilize that kind of information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about personalities, and you hear this a lot of times from the great and powerful Mark Dury. Like, he talks about that a lot, about personalities, and some of the bigger, older bucks, and Blake, you can probably, attest to this a little bit, is you probably see some of that pattern when they're really young, and you probably see that really change from 3, 4, and 5, I would assume, to where they kind of get dialed in, scale it back some, and like you said, you'll have the one that will travel a mile, and then the other one that will barely travel 150 yards, but it's so key. It's based on that individual and that personality, and I don't think lots of times we talk about that, especially when it comes to summer scouting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of guys overall just skip that in general. I mean, I've always said if you see an article or you read a headline that says this is the way to kill mature deer, it's probably not 100% accurate, because you can't kill them all the same way. And Mark does a great job really understanding deer. I think Mark's one of the guys that is kind of like I am, where we really go into it as a student whenever we watch any kind of deer movement. Now, Mark has some options and some things that a lot of guys don't have, I guess, for larger properties and things like that. And I really like, over the last couple of years, Mark's kind of broken it down into smaller tracks and trying to kind of relate to the hunters that don't have, hundreds and hundreds of acres, but have little small tracks, and how to kind of utilize those kind of tactics and get in front of deer. And I think overall for me, I kind of set the same kind of standard for, we have small tracks. I mean, I have a couple big ones, but nothing over 650 acres, and a lot of 100 to, 30. And realistically, we talked on it before, and we've talked on it before, we do a lot of feeding in the summertime, which some states you're not able to do that. But if you are, Missouri, you just can't feed during season. So we try to really utilize that to kind of build the culture of our deer herd. And when I say build the culture, I mean, we're reducing stress, and we're trying to have a positive influence or positive interaction anytime we're in the deer woods. So I pretty much kind of, we've gone out of the box. A lot of guys are like, you got to stay scent free, you got to spray down, you got to keep your cameras in bags. And I used to do all that stuff. And what I found out is that it gave me a false confidence that I was undetected and that I was getting in there without those deer knowing it. And what I found out is that I was making moves and doing things that essentially were alerting deer, I guess, putting deer onto my presence and raising the pressure, overall pressure on my farm. So we went back to it, and I was like, well, what if we, let's go at it from this approach. Let's be super predictable of these deer, but let's always have a positive influence on them. So what we try to do is really run our cameras on the edges. We don't try to push into them too much. Run our cameras really in the same spots about every year, too. We don't really try to throw curveballs at them. We'll essentially, set them on the edge, same edge. We'll have the same mineral lick. And every time we go into those cards, I'll go between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., hottest part of the day. Everything's usually down. It's pretty predictable. I'll go in. I'll usually drive. It's usually a spot I can either drive my truck or my side-by-side to every time, and I do that every time. I don't ever walk into them. I'll drive those in. I'll be loud. I'll drop the tailgate, I'll rip the bags open, I'll slam the buckets of shock effects around, whatever I got to do. I'm not trying to be quiet. But essentially I'll dump it, I'll change the card out, we'll change batteries if we need to, get back in the truck and drive out of there. And lo and behold, we've been doing it now for about 4 years, and what the amount of pressure is unreal. Like, we have deer, and I've documented a couple times on my Instagram and stuff, but, we have deer showing up within 2 minutes of feeding. So those deer had to be sitting there watching. There's no way, they could get there within 2 minutes without it. But, we kind of build that culture with those does, with those bucks. And, building it with the does is really important. And it's important for over the long term, because you got to remember those does are what's going to bring those fawns in there. And if the does don't, just smell of a human scent or whatever the case may be. So we try to kind of build that from day one with them. And, with us being in year 5 now of these farms and really doing that, it has really helped. I've noticed on our mature deer, we're hunting 2 deer this year. Robbie's hunting 1. I have another one that we've followed for the last 3 years, pretty much through the deer, been on the process for 3 years. And they're super laid back deer that, will absolutely tolerate any kind of human interaction that goes in as far as predictability and what we do as far as feeding goes. Heck, the deer Robbie's hunting, I know he's checked that card every 2 days, and that deer still shows up in the evening every day, almost in the daylight, with him going in there every 2 days and doing it. But the deer's accustomed to it. We've never given him a negative experience. He stays on the farm. He's very active on the farm, and it kind of works wonders when you talk about, kind of dropping that stress level over the overall farm. to the amount of daylight pictures you see and to the amount of daylight deer movement just in general throughout the entire year of what a guy can do, you know?
Yeah, no, all that makes total sense, and there's a lot of stuff that I was going to bring up today in different little forms of context, but you kind of hit it all just in one swing there, Blake. But I wanted to talk a lot about just the simple things like that of kind of being repetitive and doing the same thing. And one big thing, which you alluded to in this, was don't go digging in deep into your spots. Like field edges, run those cameras on the field edge, you know, same truck, be noisy, do the same things every time. And it is a different mindset, and it's almost counterintuitive to think you need to act like that, because I did the same things you've always done, Blake, previously, you know, using the wind on those days. I'm going to, you know, some guys forget legitly that's part of hunting. You're hunting when we're changing these cameras, doing feeding, but it's counterintuitive to a little bit to the psyche of a hunter when you're acting like that, but it works so much more well for the deer in how they think and react to situations. And like you said, those deer know you're there, whether you're sneaking through or not. They're going to catch you. They're going to be way more perturbed at you by sneaking in than you just coming in saying, hey, I'm here, look at me, we'll be out of here in a minute. And that system really, really does work. But a big thing, just like I said, you know, not counterpoint, but to point to what you said is, you know, use those field edges. Don't dive deep into your bread and butter spots. Stay out of those. Let the deer stay in there, and just let the deer come out to you and come out to the feed and do what they normally do, because they're going to do it in the summertime when they're not pressured.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you want to think about it like the easiest way to think about it is you want to surprise them one time, and that's when you kill them. So you want to try to set up kind of what I would call like a trap, essentially, in a lot. In the, you know, when we talk about right now, you know, this time of the year especially, we're not trying to surprise them anytime. Like surprise a deer, I'm not happy about it because I don't want to. I want to be completely predictable because there's just no reason to put any pressure on him. There's no reason to take a chance on him right now. He's settled in, eating. You know, he's thinking about one thing, and that's food and water, and that's it. That's all. You know, in survival. So we're going to try to make that as easy for him as we can in the summer. But now going to the fall, that's when it becomes a little bit creative, and you got to take a risk, an educated risk, where you work that deer and then you'll set up a trap. So essentially, when I say set up a trap, in Missouri we have a lot of draws and little thickets and things like that. And what we'll do is I'll have a stand, you know, set interior, probably, I don't know, 60 yards in, 50 yards in, wherever I think that staging area is where he feels really comfortable. And I'll run my camera on the edge, and I'll monitor if I hunt that stand based off that camera on the edge. So I stick to my same predictable pattern that I do, right? I'm driving in. I can feed mineral during the season. So during the season, what I'll do is drive in, and I may dump literally a half a pound of mineral out on the ground in my mineral lake. Seems stupid, but just some kind of new positive interaction I want. So I'll go in and I check that card. I'll dump half pound of mineral down. Pull the card and look, okay, he's been on there 3 nights in a row, either at dark or, 5 minutes after dark. Well, I'm pretty confident that at that stand, I can hunt that stand and probably have a pretty good shot at him on the interior side of it. So that's a way that I'll know, okay, say I've got cold front coming that day. Say we're in October or even late September, and I've got a 15-degree cold front coming. I've already thought about that in the summer when I put stands in, and it's a matter of thinking of you want to hunt. I know a lot of guys want to hunt their early season sets with south winds or west winds, and for us, that's just not what you get when you get a cold front. Usually, sometimes a west, but usually always a north, maybe even a northeast early in the year. So we hang our early season sets with north winds, for a north wind. And if that deer, go back to my strategy, we go back, he's there at daylight or a little bit before dark. I know I've got a pretty dang good chance if I've got a 20-degree cold front coming in, I can go in on that north wind set and get in front of him that first night. So that's where my surprise is going to be, right? So I'm going to bounce in and try. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, you pull back out and you go back to the same type of scouting. I'm not going to move a camera back in there now to see, you know what I mean? Like I'm going to keep my camera. I'm going to go back to my same strategies and work that process until I find a deer that goes along with it to where I can get in front of him. And it's something, unless you get into the rut where he's just out. It's, you know, November, it's really a hard time to kill a deer because there's a lot of luck involved in November, but it's pretty easy from a hunting standpoint. You just try to pick the best wind and you spend the most time you can in the stands. You know, there's not a lot of guesswork to it because the unpredictability is just outrageous that time of the year, you know.
It is, yeah, for sure. The only other thing you can do, Blake, is what you just alluded to, is keeping that pressure the same. You know, whether it's, like you said, always giving them that positive reinforcement that you're there, no harm was done, and you get out of there. And
right.
I think it's key what you said as well. Like, you didn't go diving in like, oh, I didn't get the picture I wanted. Now I'm gonna go in here and make an interior scrape in the middle of the day
right.
when he's headed 80 yards from your stand, some direction. You know.
Right.
So what I like about
you never want to move.
This is a system you're doing all year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you never want to move pressure to their stand. A lot of guys I see make the mistake of moving cameras to their stands, right? Well, you really just increase pressure at your stand because you essentially left a calling card by your stand, number one, that flashes, that, you know what I mean, that carries your scent, that some cameras make noise. And it's another, you know, you're going to go in, you're going to want to check that card, you're going to want to see what's going on there. There's just no reason to move that pressure to that stand. You need to think about camera spots that will tell you what's going by that stand without being at that stand, if that makes sense. You know, you want the least amount of pressure and penetration that you can do. And ultimately, I think that's where a lot of guys fail, is that, you know, there's this false sense of confidence that they think they can spray down and go in and check a card at a stand site, and they may get away with it, but you're taking a pretty good chance that some deer is going to know you were there, whether it be smelling where you touched the camera, smelling where you walked in, or smelling you or seeing you when you did go in to do it. And it's just unnecessary pressure. Yeah,
for sure. You know, another thing that, you know, kind of communicates from summer to fall or the rut, Blake, is, you know, sometimes, especially on the edge of a field, we have those, what I just call like a dominant scrape, where it gets used year after year. Mm-hmm. The same tree, the same looking branches, you know, hopefully willing that that tree didn't fall down or the branches didn't break. But is that a philosophy you incorporate too, Blake, is kind of keeping those scrapes clean, even though they may not use them, but keeping it there and then using the same philosophy on the field edge and only checking it when you're going in to, you know, do a positive reinforcement?
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of guys do, you'll see them, they'll put the camera on the scrape site, and I never do that. Like, I don't want to disrupt that. I used to do that a lot. I made that mistake, right? I wanted to get pictures. I'm a trail camera freak. I love pictures. And I wanted to go get pictures of that deer on that scrape. So if I found a big scrape, first thing I did is plop a camera on it, right? And what I found out is those deer know that camera's there, and they end up stopping that scrape, and like 3 foot out of the view, there'll be another scrape, a new one that wasn't there before, and they start using it, and they abandon the one the camera's on. So I immediately, you know, when we go back to that process, what I started doing is moving that camera, and I may put it on that edge, but I may put it 10 yards on each side, or I may put a camera on 10 yards of each side of that scrape. And what that allows you to do is get what bucks are going in. Maybe you don't get them stopped right there in front of the scrape, but you'll get them going to and from, and they'll still keep using that scrape. So you still keep getting the intel, but you're not pressuring near as bad. And it's a way for us to really tell, you know, those big scrapes are huge in October, especially late September, to let us know what new bucks have moved back into the property. You know, minerals seems to really get abandoned about that time of the year. Acorns are giving them a ton of nutrition, and they really don't need much. So we usually, you know, we'll run them on minerals just because your does still go to minerals, which obviously we know that when does are going in there, the bucks want to be present, or at least want to go there and see what's going on that time of the year. But ultimately the buck, if it's up to him, he's going to hit a scrape for sure. So we'll try to move those cameras around those scrapes, but not necessarily on those scrapes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, for sure. And it's such a key thing, just that philosophy. Again, if you're not pressuring those deer, those scrapes on the field edges, they really work. And one thing that is key to that, statement is not pressuring. So, again, there's no reason to bust inside and do all that stuff. You can check your cameras, especially that time of year. You're only checking them, by chance. You should be only doing this when you go in or exit. But Blake, you're on a pattern where your starts in the summer. You're in there. Like, what are you in there now, Blake? I think you told me offline, like every 4 or 5 days. So you're repeating a pattern so much that they're at the point where they just, like, when you walk by, they kind of just blink and like, hey, he's back. It's not a big deal anymore.
Right. Yeah, we're driving in. I mean, heck, like I said, we've had many deer that show up on the mobile camera within 2 minutes of being in there. And after I drive out there, 2 minutes later, a deer show up on the pilot. I mean, that deer had to be bedded within 50 yards to 100 yards of me and watch me dump all that feed.
Blake, sorry if I cut you off there. To test that is, when was this, Blake? December or January? You were literally sending me photos from you in the truck. You hadn't even left yet. And you had like 5-6 does like on that pile, like coming out to feed.
Yeah. There's a YouTube video of it on the Unfiltered thing where I had like 20 some deer, 22 or 24 deer come out with like $5 and a bunch of does, and I was in the truck. I just shut my tailgate and they were eating at the back of the bumper of the truck. But that's a little different situation where those deer, that time of the year, winter's always a really good time. They have to eat and they have to survive. And if you get a really, really, really cold, hard winter and you feed a lot, those deer become so dependent on it that they'll pretty much do anything they can to go eat. And in that situation, those deer just were hungry, man. I had dumped food, and I got back in my truck to try to warm up, and I had an email on my phone, and I was answering the email because I had service right there, and I just caught movement out of my rearview mirror, looked up, and there's deer there. So, I start recording it, and I just sit there and watch them, and they come out, and they're kind of nervous, but they're eating, and they're doing their own thing, and, but it's just, ultimately, that time of the year is a great time of the year if you want to try to introduce feeders. Like, a lot of guys ask me about feeders. We feed on the ground a lot just because it's a little bit less penetration, less of a calling card, unless you can really establish that feeder over time. And what we'll do if we do put a feeder on an area is we will essentially just go in and take that feeder in January or February, set it up and put food in it, and then feed around on the ground below it. And that ultimately kind of introduces those deer, and they'll tolerate it a little bit more that time of the year, as opposed to if I were to introduce one right now when there's other food readily available and they're not having to eat to survive. So we've seen a really big gain in that too. So that's another little tip for, late season if you do start feeding, is if you want to introduce a feeder, try to do it in January or February with a real harsh winter.
No, that makes total sense. And I know you said this a few moments ago. That's totally different situation, which I agree. But my point being with that was just a testament to, you figured out a pattern, a program, I should say, that works. And they repeat this pattern every time with you. And so much to the point where they are near, the most important time of the year to get food, that they're so comfortable with what you're doing that they literally came out and was right next to your truck. So, it's totally different for sure in the summer. Those are having fawns. They got their guard up. Bucks are growing horns and velvet, and they got their guards up. But that time of year just goes to show you, the premise of this program and how it works is just really crazy. And you think that it's like I said kind of earlier, you almost would think it's counterintuitive, but it works just the opposite. It's saying that we're no threat. We're always here. Look at you guys are fine, and now we're leaving. So that's the way you.
Yeah, I mean, if you doubt the process, I mean, look at what cattle do. I used to weren't on a strategy or weren't on a, you know, pasture cows that had never been fed like that. And you could go in essentially, and after a month, you could drive in with the right colored truck and honk the horn, and every cow would run to you from no matter where it was in the pasture because it got onto the program. I mean, deer the same way in the aspect of look at farmers. I can't tell you how many farmers I know who have shot giant deer off of a combine or seen giant deer off of some implement, off of a tractor. It's because they see those all the time, and they're never, I guess, a threat to them, right? They see it out there, so deer tolerate that because they understand that there's no pressure with it. It's something that, you know, is very. I don't know why guys haven't done it in the past, and maybe they have, but at least they haven't shared it. But anybody can implement the strategy. Public land guys, they kind of struggle with it a little bit more, obviously, because, you know, they can't control what all goes on that public ground. But the guys that do, the guys that have any kind of leases or any kind of private ground and can control who goes in the farm and stuff can do this no matter how big a farm they are and no matter how much food they dump on the ground. You just become really predictable until it's time not to be.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's, you know, there's so many stories, but you just, like, that's perfect what you just said is, you know, I've heard Lee Lakowski say it. I've heard Mark Dury say it. I've heard you repeat this numerous times, and it's just so important to take those situations like that and things you've learned. Like you hear cattle guys say it all the time, but it's also true. But it's so funny how you can get there and manipulate what you're doing with that comfort with them. You know, you can walk over there and check those trail cameras, and by default, because they're comfortable with that, they're giving you that most recent information, and that's what this is all about, is that MRI. And like I said, it's a negative on them, but for us it works, that they get that comfort level, and they're like, hey, we're coming out, and I'm letting you know which direction I came from, which way I'm going, and what time I'm doing it at. And that's key to this program.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I know that religiously, Blake, you do this, you know, hardcore on your properties. What else do you do throughout the year? I mean, do you spend any time from afar doing some glassing and bean fields, or just as a side note, like just something that you kind of like to do and just have fun with?
Yeah, for a little bit. I mean, again, we talk about I don't want to be unpredictable, right? And what I don't like about scouting from the field edge or going in, I see a lot of guys go in and they'll get in the bean field and they'll put up the spotting scope and they'll do that. It's good, but also I got to make sure I remain very predictable, and I don't want to take a chance of a bad wind, a wind swirling, a deer seeing me, things like that. So if I can scout, I got some spots set up that I can scout from the pickup from a ways away, and we do that every now and then just to kind of see what's going on with bucks and try to get some footage or try to get some pictures of them up on the hoof for us. But for the most part, we're not going to sacrifice a lot to do that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to take a big risk to do that. It's just not
worth it.
It's just not worth it in Missouri. Now, if I was out west, absolutely, I would. That'd probably be my mainstay, because you know how it is out there. You just can't get trail cameras, totally just can't cover it. Yeah. You know, you got to do that, but you're able to do it from a long ways away and not be intrusive. In Missouri, it's kind of hard to do without being intrusive a little bit, and for me, I don't want to sacrifice getting pictures or video of a deer in velvet as opposed to getting him killed in the fall by adding pressure to him. So I really, really, really focus a lot on trail cameras, and, you know, my deer are used to trail cameras. We used to have deer. I mean, we used to bounce cameras around. It's kind of funny. We used to bounce them around because we'd be like, oh, they're going around our cameras, right? We're not getting all of them. We got to move them around. We used to bounce cameras around, and I cannot tell you how many bucks we had go completely inside out when that camera went off. You know, you have a picture of a buck, and he gets one, you know, that IR flash goes off or the regular flash goes off, and they just freaking lose it. And they, you know, you get one picture of them and that's it. Or they're just nervous. You know, you can just tell they're just on the edge and they're looking at the camera and they're smelling it and they're walking around. They just don't like it. And since we've become predictable with the cameras and have them in the same spot, the deer don't even pay attention to them. I can tell you I've got a deer right now that's a 5-year-old on the farm that's probably going to be 180 inches that will literally eat. Like I always make sure when I dump piles of big tine out, I'll run like a stream, almost a line straight from my camera, about 2 feet from and from my camera. I'll put a pretty heavy pile, and then I'll run that pile back away from the camera, probably 15 yards, and then put another big pile. And what I found is, that kind of gets those deer closer and closer to the camera. I get a bunch of different pictures of them, different angles, close pictures, far pictures, all that stuff. And this deer, I can tell you from the time he was a 3-year-old, would always eat on the near pile. And I have just tons of pictures of him over the years of him like 2 feet from the camera, really, really close, tight, awesome shots of him. And to this day, this year he's probably going to be like, say, 180s. And he literally right now is eating, 2 feet from the trail camera, and never even close to alert, on edge, anything about that camera. Because we just built to it, and it's okay, you know what I mean? It's normal. And that camera, he knows going to that feed site, there's a camera there, and he just tolerates it because it's part of the program. If I were to move a camera on him, I don't know how he would react. He's used to trail cameras, or maybe he wouldn't because he's not used to that trail camera being in the same area. Either way, I'm not going to do that because it's just not worth it, and I'm getting pictures of him where I want to on my program, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I think one thing, you said that you guys ran in and changed cameras, blah, blah, blah. And part of that is just us and being so greedy. We have to know more and more and more.
Right.
But it just, the program like Blake's talking about is like, if you're already getting that information, what more do you need? You don't need to know if he's 20 feet that way. He's right in front of the camera now. So
right.
That's what's, is really the important information is, he's still there, and if he's still there at some point, you should be able to kill him. And again, you don't get so greedy and so crazy that you have to kind of change things so often that it literally spooks the deer, because initially when you do go into a new property or start a new property, you do that. You kind of blow out that area for a bit. But once you get started and can regulate it and keep things going the same way, and even to the point where, I have a couple farms where I legitly, until they die, run the same camera. It always smells the same. The flash is always the same, or the infrared's always the same, or the IR. So it's always the same, and that's just part of the process too. Is the little sound it makes, they all get used to that. It's on the same fence post every time. Just all those little details really count. And like I said, don't get too caught up with like, well, man, if he's here, I got to move it over here and just find out where exactly he's coming out at. What's the matter? He's right there on your field edge as it is. So kind of sometimes be happy with what you got.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, I'm the same way. Like, it's always just this eating thing inside of you. Like, man, you want more pictures. You want to know where he is. You want a little bit more. But what I've done, at least for my decision process, is for when I'm doing anything, right? If I'm putting in, it doesn't matter if I'm putting in a lick, I'm going to go scout, I'm going to go hang a stand, I'm going to go dump feed, I'm going to go dump mineral, whatever the case may be. My thought process is always the question of, is it worth blowing him because I'm going to blow him? You know what I mean? Like a lot of guys go into it with this false confidence that I can get away with it, right? I would do it with every time I go in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get picked off by doing this. Is what I need to do worth getting picked off for? And that really helped me a lot with kind of shutting myself down of the things I wanted to go do and being greedy. It kind of made me think back to like a pro and con list of it, you know what I'm saying? To where number one on the con list is I'm blowing the deer out of the farm. So is it worth me going?
Number 2 is I'm blowing the deer out of the farm.
Exactly. Like every time I go into my farm, in my brain, if I do something outside of my process, I know, or at least I tell myself, I'm going to blow this deer out of the farm. So is what I'm doing worth that? And sometimes it is. Like if you got to go hang a stand, hey, you got to go hang a stand, right? So worth blowing him out of the farm? It is, because I got to go in one day for 30 minutes and hang a stand. I'm going to go in and out real quick. I got to do it. I'm going to blow the deer out of the farm, but I got to do it, right? And I'm content with that, and I'm going to go do it. But if it's day 2 of my camera sitting there, and I'm thinking, man, I want to go see if he's on that card. I'm going to blow that deer out today, though. Is that worth it, or should I wait? You know what I mean? Like it kind of gives you a step back where you're like, I'll wait. I can wait till, you know what I mean? Give it the time it needs to sit, kind of thing. And ultimately, I think that's what, a lot of guys mess up is, they kind of give in to themselves and trying to convince themselves to do things and be more aggressive just because of a personal want, as opposed to the bigger picture of man, I am going to get picked off. You know, he is going to know I was in there. Is what I'm doing worth that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's funny, like I have buddies right now that have checked their cameras 3 and 4 times over, and I've yet to go in once to check these. Now, I will this week, but we're on 4 or 5 weeks of them out there, them soaking, and, you know, I'm going to go through the same pattern I always do. I'm going to go in at noon when it's bright, when it's hot, and it's, you know, they're going to should be as far away as from the field edges as they should be. So I'm not jeopardizing anything. I'm going to refresh the mineral, change my card, maybe the batteries. You know, in 5 minutes I'm out of there. And again, hopefully, you know, that camera's functioning right. I have all the information I need. I'm going to go back, check that card, and I'm not going to move that camera again until, believe it or not, until it's getting close to, you know, maybe transitioning to a scrape or something. But that's it. So it's literally at this time, you know, once a month routine to check these cameras. And, you know, Blake, I mean, we've talked about it offline before, but that's the biggest mistake we know guys make is weekly, 2 weeks. I just can't stay out of there. Oh my gosh, I'm getting 1,000 pictures a day on mineral and feed. I got to go change the card. You don't have to. Let them sit.
No, get a bigger card. Every camera takes a 32 gig card, which sold 16,000 pictures, right?
That's a ton. Yeah.
But, that is so if you're getting 2,000 pictures a week, that thing's going to last you for 8 weeks. Like, the biggest thing is, I always tell guys too, is pull a calendar out, right? And pull a calendar out for the year. Look at your phone, whatever the case may be. Go from when you put your cameras out. So say June 1st, June, July, August, September, right? Those 4 months. Check your cards every 4 days or every 4 weeks, right? Every month or say bi-monthly. If you check them every bi-monthly, you're in there 8 times total over those 4 month periods, right? But then go in and check it every week. If you're in there every week, you've doubled that. Do you see what I mean? Like you've doubled that interaction, doubled the chances of blowing the deer, doubled your pressure into that farm just by checking them and just by not sitting and waiting for full 2 weeks. Like I literally at one point had to go through, you know, when I was making this transition years ago, I had to go through on a calendar and mark when I was going to check the camera, and I wasn't going to check the camera before that date because I knew my interactions going into that farm for that summer were going to be, I had it limited to 10 interactions total for the whole summer. I was going to be there 10 times total from June 1st to September 1st. That's what I was going to do. So I set that up to when I was going to check cards. I run 32 gig cards in my camera and go. You know, it just reduced it by half of my interactions going in there. Right. And that's a huge difference that guys don't really, you know, you don't realize it because you talk yourself into, just one real quick one won't hurt. One real quick one won't hurt. Well, it does hurt. And those things stack up and mount up, and over time, you're in there 2 to 3 times as much as you should be in there or need to be in there.
Yeah, exactly. And then you start to see the decrease actually in each one of those camera pulls, which guys don't, you know, equate to that. They're the ones with the problem. That's the problem is you doing that so often.
Right. And then they get crazy and try to do off-the-cuff stuff. And then it gets
more aggressive, right. It snowballs because they're like, oh, the deer are gone. They're over here feeding. And then, you know, you blow out a whole property. But, you know, like I said, sometimes it looks like, you know, I know you're on the more of a feeding pattern than I am here, but literally it looks like I probably haven't done nothing in weeks. And it's like, it's comical to like some of me and my buddies because I'm like, they'll ask me and I'm like, no, man, I haven't gone in 4 or 5 weeks, but there's a reason. Every year in Michigan, I'm one of the only guys I know that gets multiple shooter bucks on a trail camera. May not kill them.
Right.
That's the point is information. I'm getting that information where they're not. So that just goes to show you what this process does, how important it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really have 2 options. You either stay out or you stay predictable, as minimal as possible. But guys try to do they try to get in those, like those are 2 polar opposites actually, and people try to get, you know, they fall somewhere in the middle where they don't stay out, but they're really aggressive in the farm. And ultimately, you know, it ends up just causing harm to you. And I'm not saying you're going to run every deer off your farm because you won't, because there's going to be deer that do tolerate it. But ultimately, to keep the ones on the farm that are really predictable and to keep the predictability, it's about being able to survey them without them knowing it and without them being pressured. And that's the big trick of it, you know. It's a lot harder to kill a deer that knows he's being hunted.
Yep, for sure. Yep. No, there's a lot of advantages to that in being that farmer in the combine, like-minded, so to speak, and taking advantage of those. If you have a 2-track or a side trail off the bean fields, to use those, because like you alluded to earlier, Blake, how many of those farmers have killed giant bucks because they see that every day. And it's just the same thing. It's just part of the program. They see that action every day. That action was safe. I'm good. And believe it or not, you can keep doing this over and over and keep getting all the information you need to be, a very productive deer hunter in that aspect.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Blake, I wanted us to get into some food plot stuff, but let's save that for part 2 of this for the summer scouting series, and we'll dive deep into some food plot stuff maybe next week.
Absolutely, yeah, sounds good.
All right, man. Well, thanks for today. Yeah. Thanks for the great information, and as always, man, it's kind of mind-blowing to hear some of the stuff Blake has done, and not what he gets away with, so to speak, but he's earned that right with the deer to get away with it because he's always out there doing the same thing, never being intrusive, and it's paid off great for Blake. And we'll definitely catch up next week, Blake, and cover some food plots.
Sounds good, man.
All right, thanks, man.
Right,
as you guys know, check us out every week at iTunes and the Unfiltered Doors app and Outdoor Podcast channel, and we'll see you guys real soon.